Do Democrats as a party want crime to be high, want murders to continue to outpace national capitals around the rest of the world? When you look at Washington, D.C., you compare it to London, you compare it to Paris, you compare it to Mexico City, you compare it to Tokyo, you compare it to Beijing. Find me a country with a large population and a developed economy, and I'll find you a country that's safer than Washington, with a capital that's safer than Washington, D.C. It doesn't have to be this way. But if you listen to Democrats, they seem to want it to be this way because they won't do the obvious things that would make things better in D.C. Now, this brings me to the press conference that was just had a little while ago by the mayor of D.C., Mayor Bowser, in which she was trying to lay out, of course, that the whole Trump thing here, it's crazy what's going on. Well, Trump actually is acting by federalizing law enforcement in D.C. for a set period of time. He's acting completely within his authority. D.C. is different than the powers that the president has in any other place when it comes to effectively a police power situation. D.C., the Home Rule Act of 1973, makes it very clear that what Trump is doing here is completely within the scope of his powers. So Democrats can cry about this all day. He's allowed to do this. He's doing it. But then we get to the narrative that is out there right now and what they're trying to say, which is D.C.'s not that bad. Bull crap. I've lived in D.C. twice, and let me tell you, D.C. is a dangerous city. It is far more dangerous than post-Giuliani. Notice I added that post-Giuliani New York City. So starting, and really, if you look at by the numbers, if you look at D.C. in the early 90s and New York in the early 90s, I'm actually not sure which one. I think D.C. might have had a higher murder rate, but I have to go check. But certainly post-1998 or so, D.C. has been a far more dangerous city. And it's just an abomination. This is our nation's capital. People should be able to walk the streets of D.C. Think of the law enforcement that you have in D.C., not just Metro Police, which is their local police department. You have a greater concentration of federal law enforcement agencies, people who work for the government with guns to enforce the law in D.C. than anywhere else in the country. And yet we have a murder rate that in 2023 was setting a record for the 21st century for D.C. That's just a couple of years ago. Oh, but now they compare the murder rate to what it was at its worst time. Why was it? You know what? Here is Mayor Bowser of D.C. trying to do a little bit of PR cleanup for what's going on in her city.
I believe that the president's view of D.C. is shaped by his COVID era experience during his first term. And it is true that those were more challenging times related to some issues. It is also true that we experienced a crime spike post-COVID, but we worked quickly to put laws in place and tactics that got violent offenders off our streets and gave our police officers more tools, which is why we have seen a huge decrease in crime because of those efforts.
Okay, so she's picking the COVID experience of Trump here and saying that's what Trump thinks of when he looks at D.C. Understand that it was bad before COVID. And understand that the Democrats told us when the crime rate was spiraling out of control during COVID that it was because of COVID. Oh, but what we found is it was actually worse when COVID lockdowns and all that ended. And why? Because of BLM, like BLM Plaza. Remember when the city of Washington, D.C., and people like Mayor Bowser supported this, painted the BLM mural on the street? BLM caused the crime spike. BLM, the narrative that cops are to blame and that the black community is unfairly, in a racist fashion, oppressed by police systematically, which is not true. It's just not true. They can tell you this as much as they want. People can make this claim. The data, the facts do not back this up. But that narrative resulted in emboldened criminals and pullbacks from law enforcement who no longer had the political backing to do their jobs, the so-called Ferguson effect, Heather McDonald coining the phrase. And things got worse all over the place. So we're still trying to climb out from the whole of violent crime that BLM put countless cities in America in. But now they're trying to say, well, it's better than it was then. Hold on, that was Biden voters. Those are Democrats, Democrat politicians, Democrat police commissioners, Democrat mayors who were all supportive of BLM. So BLM created this huge crime spike. Now we're supposed to congratulate people because it's not as bad as their political party and their ideology of BLM made it for a period of time. This is madness. And notice how she says challenging time related to some issues. The issue is BLM. The issue was the race riots happening on streets across America. That's what the issue was. And that's why D.C. had, under Biden, a huge crime spike. I think it got almost 300 murders in a city with less than, I think it was about 550,000 people. Almost 300 murders? Think about that for a moment, all right? New York City is more than 10 times the size of D.C. That would be over 3,000 murders if it was in New York City. That's what D.C. had in 2023. Philadelphia, not to get too far afield in the discussion, Philadelphia had, I think it was almost 700 murders a couple of years back. Another Democrat precinct, Soros prosecutors. The experiment has been run. The Democrats are wrong on all of this. They make it all worse. Police, cops, law enforcement, they're not racist. They're just enforcing the law. And the less they enforce the law, the worse it is for all people, and particularly for black and Hispanic people who live in high crime areas. Because they just want to live their lives like all the rest of us do. And they, are the vast majority of the population and even the highest crime areas. And yet Democrats will throw them under the bus in the name of being anti-racism. They don't want cops to do their jobs. They don't want cops to go after the criminal element that live in those communities, that are undermining those communities. It's just, I think we're all fed up. We've all had enough. All had enough of their lies. All had enough of the garbage that these Democrats spew on this. They're pro-crime. I don't know what else you can say. They're pro-crime. None of their anti-crime policies, none of their we're going to bring things down, that unless they're willing to have more cops, more arrests, more incarceration, nothing else does anything. Nothing else works. And the things that they are pretending will work, no cash bail, that just makes everything worse. And this is what we have learned. And I'll get back into Mayor Bowser here, more of this press conference in a second. But look, President Trump is doing an amazing job in the economy, but you need to take personal accountability for the dollars in your bank account. You need to do everything you can to prepare for the financial future of this country, which is going to extend far beyond President Trump's second term. It's going to be inflation. There's going to be this huge debt that we have to handle. And the dollars in your bank account, you want to have some hedging. You want to have some protection for them. That's where gold comes in. Gold has grown 40% in the last year alone in value. So if you don't own gold yet, I think you should give it serious consideration. Birch Gold Group makes owning physical gold very easy. You can convert an existing IRA or 401k as well into a tax-sheltered IRA with physical gold. Text my name, Buck, to 989898. Birch Gold will send you a free info kit on gold. Text my name, B-U-C-K, Buck, to 989898 to get started with Birch Gold today. All right, now back. Here you go. Here's back to this. Mayor Bowser saying they're at a 30-year low for crime.
This year, crime isn't just down from 2023. It's also down from 2019, before the pandemic. And we're at a 30-year violent crime low.
Okay, 30-year low compared to what, as I said? And also violent crime. How about just murders? Let's look at this for a second, shall we? Let's take a moment, because she's saying violent crime is at a 30-year low. Well, what about just murders in Washington, D.C.? If you were to look at those numbers, you would have a very different feeling about what Mayor Bowser is saying here. Because murders in D.C. by year shows you that what she is saying is a clear distraction or a clear obfuscation of the reality, okay? 187 in 2024 is what they had. 274 in 2023. 203 in 2022. You go back, you say, hold on a second. Homicides, in 2014, the number was 105. 105. In 2011, the number was 108. And now she's proud that the violent crime rate's the lowest it's been in 30. Look at the homicide rate. She's lying. This is nonsense. But you can't hide dead bodies. You can say whatever you want about assaults. Are they reported? Do we know? Are we prosecuting? You can't hide dead bodies. People know when there's a dead body. And that's a stat. And the homicide trend shows that this city, and I'm looking at D.C.'s own crime statistics, that this city is not at some 30-year violent crime. This is absurd. Absurd. You want to tell me the mayor of D.C. is making this claim that in 2024 there were 187 murders. In 2014, 10 years before that, there were 105 murders. So you're talking about a 80% increase in murders over 10 years, but it's the lowest violent crime. You could have 80% more murders, but the lowest crime rate in 30 years. Bull. Lying. They are lying to you. What else are they going to do? Admit that we're right about everything, they're wrong about everything? The Democrats don't know what they're doing on crime? Or actually, maybe they do. Maybe they just think that society needs to suffer. We all need to suffer more. This is a way that we can, pay for our sins, pay for the sins of this country's racist past or present, is that we all have to suffer as a society with more crime. Like this is a way, it's like purifying America because we have more murders, more assaults, more of all. I mean, that's an insane ideology. I think it's increasing what the Democrats believe. We all need to suffer. We haven't suffered enough. Otherwise, how do you explain what they're doing? You see the things that are being said by Democrats about this, including members of Congress and others. D.C., there's no reason for this. The D.C. is totally safe. They are living in an alternate universe. I've lived in D.C. Stuff happens in D.C. in the nicest neighborhoods. It doesn't happen in other places, in other cities, I mean. It doesn't happen in New York in the nicest neighborhoods. People will be stabbed, murdered, raped, broad daylight. I mean, the stuff that happens in D.C. and doesn't even get reported on. I just shared a thread on X before about the mansion murders, which are horrifying beyond words. I actually know a reporter who reported on it at the time, local reporter, not national, who was traumatized by just reporting on it, by finding out all the details and going to the scene of the crime and everything. This was a man who was an immigrant to this country, a black man who was an immigrant to America from Guyana, who kidnapped, home invasion kidnapped, and then tied up with duct tape 4 people, husband and wife, their 10-year-old son, and their maid, a woman, and proceeded to torture the son with a blowtorch to get money out of the parents, cash out of the parents that they were going to withdraw from a bank somewhere. An accomplice brought the money to this guy, tortured the son with a blowtorch, and then bludgeoned everyone to death and stabbed everybody to death while they were tied up. A monster who should have been executed. Absolutely should have been executed. He's serving multiple life sentences. But I point this out because that was 10 years ago in Washington, D.C., when the murder rate was a lot lower than it is now. And how many of you even know that story? Can you imagine if the demographic realities of that story were different? Think about that for a second. Kidnaps a whole family in their home, in a mansion, the nicest part of the whole city, richest part of the whole city, kidnaps people in their own home, tortures with a blowtorch, mutilates, murders 4 people, burns the house down afterwards, try to cover it up, lights the whole place on fire. And yet most of you have never, I bet almost none of you, unless you live in D.C., maybe you remember that. And again, I bring that up because what a horrible story. And they still think that there were accomplices who got away, I might add. The police do. They never got them. And beyond that, that was when D.C. was safer than it is now, by the numbers. So stuff like that can happen in D.C. You don't even hear about it national. Why wasn't that national news? Oh, okay. We can take some guesses. We're sick of this. I'm sick of it. You're sick of it. I don't want this. It's because it's not just about D.C., and that's what Trump realizes. This is about cities all across America. This is about the same thing we run into over and over again with these lunatic Democrats, and they're pandering on race issues. They're pandering on how we can't enforce the law. That's bad. As I've said, and I know Clay likes this argument because I've been making it on radio, and he's been making it on radio for quite some time now. Crime is overwhelmingly, violent crime is overwhelmingly a male-dominated reality, meaning it's men who do it. Men go to prison at 10 times the rate of women for violent crimes. Does that mean violent crime enforcement is anti-man? It does not. It just means that's who's committing the crimes. That should be our approach to crime and law enforcement in every respect on violent crimes all across the country. You do it, you pay the price. That's it. Doesn't matter what the numbers show. You don't change based on, but we need to find more Pacific Islanders. We need to find more Eskimos who are committing crimes. No, sorry. Whoever's committing the crimes does the time, gets punished. That's it. And then that brings me to the role that, of course, prosecutors have in this. We'll get to that in a second. Look, our federal government has its share of problems funding things over the long term, like Social Security. But there is hope for a funding solution. Jim Rickards, a 50-year government insider who has advised 4 presidential administrations, says President Trump is on the verge of a breakthrough that could save Social Security. Rickards is on record saying America is anything but broke. He thinks investors who understand why could make a fortune in the months ahead. If the Trump administration's future move is correct on this one, it could solve the Social Security funding problem coming down the road and a whole lot of others, too. Jim Rickards believes that if you're over 50, this could be your last chance to create lasting wealth, regardless of your politics. For the full story and learning how you can profit, visit birthright2025.com. That website is birthright2025.com, paid for by Paradigm Press. And now we get to Mayor Bowser, who also seems to not understand the Constitution or the laws or very much at all about the city that she is in charge of.
I speak for all Americans. We don't believe it's legal to use the American military against American citizens on American soil. I'm not a lawyer, and but I think that's a fairly widely held fact.
Yeah, it's not about deploying the military to just attack people on the streets. It's about using the National Guard to assist with law enforcement tasks as necessary in an emergency situation, which President Trump has declared. Now, right now, he hasn't necessarily deployed National Guard. That may happen, but this is about stopping gang members from shooting people. Well, who is going to be negatively affected by this other than people that we want to be negatively affected, which is criminals? Who do we think is going to be targeted here by this law enforcement surge? And keep in mind, all these federal agencies, I have to remind people of this, all these federal agencies, a lot of them have jurisdiction. They just don't necessarily focus on these crimes. Too busy chasing January 6 individuals like the FBI was. But anything that involves drugs, interstate commerce, gang activity, selling drugs across state lines, moving guns across state lines, it's all federal. It's all federal and can be federally prosecuted, which is so important because there's not the same, first of all, you don't have parole in the federal system, and there isn't the same ability for the Democrats in D.C. to subvert the justice system because Judge Jeanine is the U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia. That's right, Judge Jeanine. And she is sick and tired of this nonsense, and she's going to put bad people who hurt people away. Remember, we're talking about violent crimes here. They're going to make it sound like, but, this is going to be, it's like unpaid parking tickets, and they're just going to lie about this stuff. No. If you've pulled a gun on somebody and said, I'm going to kill you unless you give me money, I think you deserve a long time in a cell. If you've shot somebody and haven't killed them, but you've shot somebody in the course of that robbery, I think you need decades in a cell. If you've murdered somebody, I think you should go to prison for the rest of your life or even be executed. That's the way this should go. That's the way that a serious civilization, a serious society would treat these things. And this notion that if you're 16 or 17, you can't be held responsible for heinous crimes. We're not talking about somebody who's caught, smoking a joint somewhere. That's not the problem in D.C. No one's going to prison for that. No one's even talking about that. All right. Yeah, there are some things that you can do when you're 16 or 17 that we all understand, shouldn't be treated as as big a deal as if you were an adult. People make mistakes. Fine. A little shoplifting when you're 16 or 17. Yeah. Okay. It's embarrassing. It should be cleaned off your record at some point if you don't get in any more trouble in a few years, whatever it is. You pull a gun on somebody? You're a part of a gang assault in the course of stealing a vehicle? No, you should do real time. Long time in prison for that. Because you can't be trusted to be safe in society. You're a barbarian. This thing of acting, people join the military at 17. I mean, that happens with some regularity. Join the military at 17. And the fact of the matter is this this cohort of youth that are 14, 15 that are doing serious crimes, knowing that they can't really be touched by the law, is a huge problem in D.C. This is why Big Balls, I forget the guy's actual name, but that was his online code name, if you will, the guy who worked for Doge who got attacked, who was breaking up it was a gang of youths, teenagers, who were trying to do a carjacking. You're going to carjack somebody when you're a teenager, try to steal their car? It's maddening. And we're tired of it. And the Democrats, they can say whatever they want. They can sling the insults. They can say, oh, it's horrible. Oh, that's racist. They can make whatever claims they want. We're done. We're done with this. Trump is done with it. Republicans are done with it. All right-thinking people, even I think some Democrats, realize that it's just madness. It doesn't have to be this way. It is a choice. Democrats choose to allow this crime to exist the way that it does, to persist the way that it does. Our sponsor here is Preborn. You know, every day, thousands of women across our country are contending with an unplanned pregnancy with few options. But Preborn is there for them. And Preborn says, look, let's introduce you to the little baby growing in your womb with an ultrasound. Because once that ultrasound process gets underway, it can be such a game-changing moment. And so often the choice of life becomes apparent in that moment for that mom. 350,000 babies have been saved by Preborn in this way. This is happening every day. That's why your monthly support to Preborn is so critical. For just $28 a month, you can save a life, which is the price of an ultrasound. $28 a month. Every month, you'd be helping save a little baby's life for just $28. Please set up that recurring donation. Dial pound 250. Say the keyword baby. That's pound 250. Say baby, or go to preborn.com/buck. Preborn.com/BUCK. Thanks for being here, team. Shields high.